Okay, so I don't know if you're following the whole Jeffrey Epstein story. Are you? Because 2 days ago, something really big happened. It was so big that it forced Prince Andrew to give up his titles. You know what it was? A book. A book was published that was written by one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. And in this book, she tells everything that happened to her while she was being trafficked. And let me tell you, it is shocking, shocking what they did to her. The sexual scenes are so distressing and so dark. And the people doing this to her were so high up the hierarchy of both the US and Israel that I think it is a miracle that this book was even published. But here's the twist. Here's the twist. The author of this book is dead. Yeah. Yeah, this book was published after her death. She left the manuscript and she died this past April. Do you want to know the cause of death? Suicide. This woman was suicided in April. So naturally, a lot of people have a lot of questions. Before, it used to be just us, crazy people with an obsession who got into this rabbit hole and wouldn't rest until we got to the bottom of it. We were asking the tough questions. But now, after this thing happened, it's the general population. It's you. Everybody wants to know, how is it possible that this thing could go on for so long? Is Jeffrey Epstein a spy? Was he running an intelligence operation? Is this why he was able to do all of these things? Well, maybe he was a spy, maybe not. We are going to find out. All right, so the story really begins in 1984 with a guy named Mordechai Vanunu. This guy managed to flee Israel with something precious. He had in his possession a camera, and inside this camera there were pictures of Israel's secret nuclear plant. You see, up until this point, nobody in the world knew that Israel was developing nuclear capabilities, and this guy had the hard evidence in his possession. So, how did he get them in the first place? Well, he was an engineer and he was hired to work at the plant. And there was a problem, though, a moral problem, because this guy was a pacifist. So it didn't sit very well with him, the fact that Israel was going to have nukes now. And one morning, he decided to just take a camera, take a bunch of pictures of everything around him, and escape the country. And now he was looking for somebody who would publish the pictures. He obviously had to knock on a lot of doors to find someone who would. But eventually, a newspaper in England called the Sunday Times agreed to publish the story. The only problem is, while he was knocking on so many doors, he knocked on the door of a con man who managed to get a hold of copies of his photos. And now the con man wanted to make a quick buck by selling the pictures to other media. And he found a good buyer. The Sunday Mirror, the competition of the Sunday Times, a tabloid who also wanted to get the scoop. So now we had two newspapers with a story, and it was a race to the press. Who's going to print them first? Well, naturally, the Conman newspaper won. The Sunday Mirror published the story first. But it didn't publish the expose on Israel's nuclear plant. No, they ran an attack piece. They ran a piece attacking the character of Mordechai Vanunu. They published all of the pictures and said they were fake. They got experts to weigh in on the veracity of the pictures, and the experts said that these pictures could have been taken anywhere. This could be a chicken factory for all they know. So that was very weird. Like, why would the owner of a newspaper having such a wonderful scoop, something that's going to sell thousands upon thousands of copies of your newspaper, decide to forego that and instead attack the person who took the pictures? It makes no sense. unless you understand who the owner of this newspaper was. You see, the newspaper was owned by a man. This man was called Robert Maxwell, and he owned this newspaper. He was a very odd fella because he was born and raised in a poor family, and yet he had managed to turn himself into a billionaire through his own hard work. He pulled himself by the bootstraps, and he was a Mossad agent. He was a Mossad agent with a great story, but a Mossad agent. Yeah. So what was he doing? Well, very simple. What he wanted to do was to publish the story first so that he could question the whole validity of the thing. So that nobody would take it seriously, you see? It was an operation. So this man, Robert Maxwell, had a facade as a billionaire, and he had a yacht. And he had named the yacht after his favorite daughter. The yacht's name was Lady Ghislaine. And because everybody started talking about his odd choice with the newspaper and suggesting that he might be a spy, he decided to take some time off and go on his yacht and lose himself at sea for a few days until everything calmed down. The problem is, Robert Maxwell never made it back. Yeah, he was a poor billionaire who died at sea while taking a piss on board of his yacht. And unfortunately, that was the last we saw of him. But other people thought that his daughter Ghislaine was also a Mossad agent. And what was she up to? What was she doing while he was moving the public opinion in Israel's favor? Well, she had a partner called Jeffrey Epstein, and she was living in New York with him. And he was also an odd fella, you see? He had a very similar story to her own father. Maybe she had daddy issues, that's why she picked him. Because Jeffrey Epstein was also a man from a poor family. He never finished college, and yet he was a billionaire. Yeah, he had 2 private islands valued at $28 million. He had a mansion in New York City in the 66th Street. He had a mansion in Ohio and another one right across from Mar-a-Lago in Florida. He had an incredible portfolio of assets. And he also was very well connected to la crème de la crème of New York. Everyone who was someone knew and hung out with Jeffrey Epstein, but nobody knew what he did for a living. The story was that he made his billions by trading in Wall Street. He had very big accounts, for example, the account of Les Wexler, who was the owner of Victoria's Secret. And by trading his money for him, he had made his billions. But nobody questioned this story, really. You see, they thought he was valid because he rubbed shoulders with all the right people. He had so much money. So nobody in his circles really know what he was doing, but they didn't seem to care too much. We, however, know what he was doing thanks to a young lady called Maria Farmer. Because in 1996, Maria Farmer went to the FBI and signed a declaration against Jeffrey Epstein, where she narrated everything that he was doing in his mansion. And how did she know what he was doing? She was the receptionist. Yeah, she was the receptionist at Jeffrey Epstein's mansion. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her story because there's a few things that she knew that was happening that are really important for us to understand how this spying business works. So what did she tell the FBI? How did she get to know Jeffrey Epstein? Well, she was an artist, and she was recommended by Peggy Guggenheim, which she was like a socialite, came from a very wealthy, very well-connected family. And her uncle was the owner of the Guggenheim Museum. And she insisted Maria met with this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, who's going to help you thrive as an artist. And Maria listened and met the guy. And at first, he hired her to be his art scout. So her job was to go to galleries and tell him what to buy. But eventually, he started giving her more and more responsibility until she was his assistant and receptionist at the mansion. And what she tells is that at first, everything weird that she saw that was going on, she attributed this to eccentricities. She thought he was just a very rich eccentric. But little by little, she started to put the puzzle pieces together. First, because there was always a huge line of teenage girls going in and out of the mansion. And also, children in school uniforms that were also going in and out of this mansion. They kept a book that they called the modeling book, and they boasted about this book often, but they kept the book in a safe. And they would only take the book out when they wanted to show it to somebody, to a guest, to someone special. She knew what was inside this book. She saw it once, and it was pictures of children in explicit poses with very little clothing on. So all of these things were making her feel very uneasy already, but things got much, much worse when two things happened. One, she went out to run errands with Ghislaine, and she would tell the driver to stop the car whenever she saw teenage girls loitering somewhere. And she would say, "Stop here, I need to go get girls for Jeffrey." The second thing is she was shown the monitor room inside the mansion. Because this was 1996, mind you. This wasn't like yesterday. This was a long time ago. This surveillance system was not cheap or easy to install. And this man had a full surveillance system, cameras all over the mansion, cameras that were hidden and you couldn't see. And then he had a monitor room where you could see through any of the cameras, and they were recording 24/7. They had mountains of tapes of the recordings that they were making. And she wasn't feeling very good about all of this. But then Jeffrey told her that she should go to Ohio, to his residence, to become a resident artist in his house. She should go there for a season and stay there for a while, and she could leave her apartment keys with him and Ghislaine. And she did. The dumb bitch did. So anyway, so she goes to Ohio, and she goes to live in, Jeffrey Epstein's house, which happened to be right across Les Wexler's mansion, the owner of Victoria's Secret. And she was living in there, and she was, doing her art, whatever. And then one day, Jeffrey and Ghislaine went to visit. But this was not just your run-of-the-mill visit. This was a special visit, because in this visit, they decided to attack her and rape her between the two. She said that the encounter was so traumatic and she wasn't expecting it at all, and that by the end of it, they left and they took pictures from her room. She had taken with her photographs to use as a study for her paintings, including nude pictures of her sisters who were minors. They took all of that with them. The next time she talked to them, they were like making jokes about what had happened, trying to make her think it wasn't important. But she was not having it. She wanted to go back to New York and have nothing to do with them anymore. The problem is, they wouldn't have that. They started to threaten her that if she ever spoke about what had happened, they were going to basically destroy her. They were going to destroy all of her paintings. They were going to find her sisters and attack them, etc. So she was stuck in Ohio. She tried to leave a few times, but the security guards at Les Mansion would tell her she couldn't leave. And at one point, even the sheriff got involved and told her that she couldn't go. So the only way that she managed to leave was by talking to her family and get them to intervene. And so she managed to go, and she went back to New York only to find what? Her apartment was completely ransacked. They had destroyed everything, taken out the furniture. They painted the walls black. Everything was a mess. And they kept threatening her over and over with horrible things. And that's when she decided to go to the police. So her first Her first instinct was to go to the police, but the police told her that they couldn't do anything about it. She had to go to the FBI. So she took her case to the FBI. And what happened? Nobody listened. Now, this was 1996. 10 years would have to go by until somebody did something about this. You see, 10 years later in Miami, a bunch of girls, like 15 girls, also made a declaration against Jeffrey Epstein for rape and all kinds of horrible things, heinous acts. And this time, he didn't get it so easy, you see. This time around, they didn't just ignore it because this was Florida. It was different people. This time, they made him pay for just one tiny little crime. You see, there was like a folder full of like crimes, horrible crimes, despicable things. But he only went to trial for just like one single, very little, small thing. And he got convicted for 18 months in a minimum security prison. And he didn't even have to stay there because they said he was working. So he would only go there like 12 hours a day. Like the other 12, he could be free, like go anywhere he wanted. He just had to go to jail to sleep, basically. It was so bad that like in documents, like legal documents, this is called like a huge oversight on the part of the prosecutor in Florida. That same guy, by the way, that same guy then got nominated for a very high position by Donald Trump. And his name is, I think, was Alex. What was his last name? He had a Latin last name. So anyway, when this guy was gonna be sworn in for his new cushy job with Trump, they asked him about the Epstein case. You know what he said? He said that he was told this guy was an asset. This guy was intelligence and he should be left alone. Yeah, so we really don't have much doubts that Epstein was a spy. He was a spy. We just don't know if it was for the CIA, for the Mossad. I think it was CIA, but what do I know? Now, here's what the book revealed, though. And I think it's important to go over the book because the book reveals how the spying system works, okay? Because it's important to understand it. How does the system work? Like, why do they need to have these guys throwing lavish parties, getting people to get it jiggy with 12-year-olds? What is the point of all of this? Some people think that the point is that rich, eccentric people have rich, eccentric tastes. Once you have enough money, nothing is good enough for you anymore because everything is just a phone call away. So you start looking for more and more extreme things. And someone like Jeffrey Epstein is the person that can provide those, a solution or a satisfaction for those peccadillos, for those those peccadillos, right? But that's not really how it goes. I want to explain to you how it works, like what is happening really. So that's why we need to listen to what happened in the book, like what was told in the book. So here's what the other victim said. Now, this victim, the one who died earlier this year, is called Virginia Giuffre. And she's one of the most outspoken victims of Jeffrey Epstein. She told her whole story several times. She went to trial. Like, the book is just a culmination of a lifetime of, telling her story, basically. And what did she say? Well, she told her story from beginning to end. And I don't know if you want all the texture and all the color. I'm going to give you all the texture and all the color. It's good. So, okay. So she met Ghislaine and Jeffrey at Mar-a-Lago. She had been hired for a party at Mar-a-Lago and she was doing, some sort of menial task. She was being paid by the hour. And that's where she met Ghislaine and Jeffrey. And she was told that she could be hired as a masseuse. She had to go back with them and give Jeffrey a massage, and then she would be paid handsomely for that. And that's it. That's all she was told. And she was 14, and she was dumb, and so she accepted. So she went back with Jeffrey Epstein and she gave him a massage and he abused her because that was his MO. But instead of just like leaving like many girls did, she actually went back for more. And she explained that she would get $200 every time she would go and let him do whatever it was he wanted. But they also told the girls that if they brought new, fresh girls in, they would also get paid for these fresh new girls. So many of the girls started out giving him massages, but then ended up being recruiters. It was kind of like a Ponzi scheme of perversion. Yeah, that's what they had, a Ponzi scheme of perversion. So for some reason they really like this girl. They really like Virginia, so they started hanging out with her more and more. And she tells that it was like being a part of a very odd family. She said that they would fuck and then she would they would watch Gossip Girl together and have some popcorn and then she would blow Jeffrey and then they would go sailing and then they would go to the town and buy like little rocks to make some DIY stuff. So it was they had a relationship basically with her, and they took her to the island. And even like the most disturbing part is when at one point Ghislaine talks to her and asks her if she wanted to have a baby, and she was like, a baby? And Ghislaine says, yes, a baby. Do you want to have a baby for me and Jeffrey? The baby would be hers and Jeffrey's. Like they could do whatever they wanted to this baby. The only thing is she was going to give birth to the baby and take care of the baby. And they were going to give her a house and pay her $200,000 to do this. And she would then, like when they took her to the island, she would then be used as an entertainer for Jeffrey's guests. And one day they would tell her, tonight you're going to meet the prince. And then she would go and, tonight you're going to meet someone very important. And she doesn't name them in the book, but she has named them elsewhere. But she says that she was with 4 billionaires, one prime minister, and one senator from the US. And the worst by far, like the worst thing that happened to her by far, was when she was sent to pleasure the prime minister. And she described him as a foreigner with a thick accent. So he didn't speak English. It wasn't his native language. And she says this man abused her so much. He was a sadist. So he didn't just want to defile her, but he wanted to cause her physical pain. And she did things so horrible to her that she was bleeding from like almost every orifice in her body and crying and writhing in pain. And this man was laughing at her when he saw her bleeding and suffering, like really horrible things. And people online have speculated about the identity of this prime minister. And from things she has said elsewhere in trials, in other declarations, and the time frame, people think, they're almost certainly, this is about Ehud Barak, Israel's prime minister at the time. He had a military background and a thick accent, and it just fits the bill altogether. So she says that after that encounter, she was never the same. And she talked to Jeffrey to ask him to never again let her, she never again wanted to go back to the island or want to meet with this man. And Jeffrey just kind of didn't really care. He told her like, well, yeah, this will happen sometimes. Like, Tuesday, this will happen sometimes. And that's when she knew that she had to escape. She knew she had to leave. But all of these stories, and I'm just summarizing them real quick, all of these stories just show you how it works. Because like I said before, this whole thing has a purpose. It's not just let's provide these eccentrics with their weird little peccadillos. No, there is a purpose to this whole thing. So let me explain that to you. Most people think Number one, that a spy is someone who fishes for information. You send a spy somewhere and they will steal secrets from people. And this is only partially true. A spy will steal secrets if there are secrets to steal. But if there are no secrets to steal, sometimes he will make the secrets happen so that he can steal them. You see? That's the business Epstein was on. It's the business Epstein was in. He was in the business of creating the secrets that could then compromise important people. He made the secrets happen. It is a blackmailing machine. That's why the entire mansion was rigged with cameras, hidden cameras that nobody could see. This is why he was taping everything that happened in the mansion. It's because this was what the operation was about. It was a blackmail operation. So then when people understand that this is what it was, so obviously if you're going to blackmail people, you want them doing the most despicable things you can. You're not going to let them just have sex with women. That wouldn't be very productive for you. You want minors, you want children, you want like horrible things. Like just imagine the worst thing you can imagine. That's what you want your target to do so that you can catch it on tape and then you can use it later. But here's where most people get it wrong. Even people who understand this part, they think that we can see a list of the people who are compromised. You know, they want to see, we need to see a list of the people who are compromised, who are being blackmailed so that they're making bad choices with our tax money, yada, yada, yada. They're wrong, you see. Every single person that is anyone in the hierarchy of power is compromised. They don't get to climb there if they're not. People think power corrupts. No. You only get access to power if you're already corrupt. Think about it with a practical mind, okay? Imagine that you're the person who has the power, all the power, and you get to choose who you're going to share your power with. Who are you going to share it with? Someone that you can control and that you know is never going to betray you? Or someone who is straight, who maybe gets into a fight with you one day, changes his mind, and then leaves you hanging? Yeah, you're not going to risk giving power to someone unpredictable. It's not very good for business. You want someone who's going to be loyal to you. And the only way that you can make sure that someone is going to be loyal to you is if you have compromat on them. If you have compromising information that you can later use to destroy them. It's the fear of getting destroyed that's going to keep them in line. And this is why these people go to these crazy parties. Some of them are freaks. Yeah, sure, why not? But some of them understand and know that it is the ticket to climbing higher. They're not going to go anywhere unless they let themselves be filmed doing despicable things. That is the way they get access to higher steps on the ladder. And that's what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. And it is also what Puff Daddy was doing. And whenever you see a mansion attached to someone who throws lavish parties, start questioning it, okay? They need the mansion because the mansion is the one rigged with cameras. They can't throw parties at a yacht because there's no cameras there. So think about it. Think about it. How many people you know that throw crazy parties have a mansion? The Playboy Mansion, Puff Daddy. You know, you have to be suspicious of these people. So that is basically all I have to say about this. And if you like the video, I would ask you to subscribe. And, you know, I love it when you do subscribe because, I don't know, I think watching the number grow makes me feel really proud and like what I'm doing is working. But, you know, I also don't kid myself. And I know that it doesn't mean much because YouTube's algorithm is not going to show you all the things that you subscribe to. You know, I'm subscribed to 1,000 channels and I never see what they post unless I go looking for it. So it's a little bit, you know, it's nice that you follow me. But you know what's better is if you want to get notified when I do post something new, then put your email in my list. And to do that, you can go here. So if you go here, there's a form and you can enter your email. And then you'll be subscribed. And whenever I post something new, I'll send you an email. Also, one thing though, make sure that you find the confirmation email. Because if you don't click on the confirmation link, you're never going to be confirmed and you're never going to receive my emails. And that's going to be very, very sad.